Stubborn as a Mule and Other Silly Similes by Nancy Loewen. Illustrated by Adam Watkins. Read by Mrs. Moan. What is a simile? Similes can be as easy as pie or as hard as nails. They might cry like babies or chatter like monkeys. A simile is a figure of speech that compares two things. These things are different in most ways, but they're alike in at least one way. A simile shows us what the two things have in common. Similes usually use the connecting words like or as. Turn the page to meet Mr. Mo and see how similes can make a story more colorful. Meet Mr. Mo. Mr. Mo is as bald as an egg. He doesn't have any hair at all, not even one. Here, Mr. Mo's head and an egg are being compared. Both are round and smooth. As bald as an egg is a simile. Metaphors can be used to compare things too. Metaphors do not use like or as. If we said Mr. Mo's head is an egg, we would be using a metaphor. Mr. Mo is as tall as a giraffe and as thin as a rail. Mark Twain used the phrase as thin as a rail in his book Roughing It, published in 1872. He was describing a skinny, sickly woman. You'll marry a combination of calico and consumption. That's as thin as a rail. Mr. Mo is not as strong as an ox, but he is rather nice. Similes can be used to exaggerate. Is Mr. Mo really as tall as a giraffe and as thin as a rail? No, but he is very tall and very thin. These similes and the simile below are a more interesting way of describing him. Today, Mr. Mo is going out. He's meeting someone very special for lunch. He wants to look good. He polishes his shoes until they shine like a new penny. He puts on his best hat. It fits like a glove. Similes often appeal to our senses. A new penny gleams. It catches our eye. And when we think about slipping our hands into a pair of gloves, we understand that Mr. Mo's hat fits him well. Mr. Mo hurries down the street. Oh no! A gust of wind blows off his hat. Now Mr. Mo's hat is as flat as a pancake. Many similes describe objects from our everyday lives. We all know what a pancake looks like. People have been using the phrase, as flat as a pancake, since the 1500s. At that time, people also said as flat as a flounder. A flounder is a very flat fish. But hardly anyone uses that simile anymore. As times change, our language changes too. At the store, a lady tries to snatch the last tin of taffy from Mr. Mo's hands. Mr. Mo really wants that taffy. He holds on tight. But the lady is as stubborn as a mule. Mr. Mo leaves empty-handed. Similes can be used to describe a person's actions and feelings. This simile isn't saying the lady looks like a mule. It's saying she is behaving like a mule. She wants to do things her way. The simile, as stubborn as a mule, has been in use since the 1800s. At that time, mules were work animals. They did the tasks that trucks and tractors do today. When mules don't want to work, they are nearly impossible to budge. Mr. Mo decides to buy flowers instead. He taps his foot. The line moves at a snail's pace. Sometimes similes don't use connecting words, but they still compare two things. Here, the phrase "at a snail's pace" means that the line is moving slowly. You could also say the line is moving like a snail or as slow as a snail. Outside the flower shop, Mr. Mo bumps into Mr. Leo. "Excuse me," Mr. Leo says in a voice as loud as thunder. Wait, that was thunder. Here's another example of a simile that appeals to our senses. This time, the sense is hearing. Thunder gets our attention. In this case, though, Mr. Mo actually did hear thunder. Mr. Leo's voice was probably quite normal. A few raindrops fall, and a few more, and now Mr. Mo is standing in a downpour. He's as wet as a fish, and if he doesn't hurry, he'll be late. Similes often include descriptive words that make the comparison more clear. Wet is a descriptive word. If we just said Mr. Mo was like a fish, we wouldn't know how he was like a fish. Is he scaly? Smelly? The word wet lets us know that Mr. Mo is as wet as if he were living in water, the way a fish does. The cafe is crowded. Mr. Mo wishes he had eyes like a hawk. Where is his special someone? Then Mr. Mo hears a voice that sounds like music to his ears. "Over here, Grandpa." Similes can sum up complex ideas in just a few words. Hawks have excellent eyesight. They can spot something small, like a mouse, from a great distance. Mr. Mo sees lots of people in the cafe, but he wants to find his special someone. Mr. Mo's hat is ruined. He didn't get his taffy. He's soaked to the skin, but sitting beside his granddaughter, he's as happy as a lark. A lark is a kind of songbird. Picture it perched on a branch, singing. Doesn't that make you feel cheerful? That's how Mr. Mo is feeling when he finally sees his granddaughter. Filling in the blanks like a blank. The similes in this book are ones that are commonly used, but there's no reason you can't make up your own. Look at these well-known similes. As quiet as a mouse. Runs like a deer. As sweet as honey. Sings like a bird. Now take off the last word and brainstorm for words to replace it. You can add more than one word if you'd like. For example, as quiet as a mouse could become as quiet as a sleeping kitten. Next, try taking off the first word, not including as. You could say as tiny as a mouse or as sneaky as a mouse, for example. Are you up for a challenge? Try this one. As nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. As blank as a blank in a blank of blank.